Dumbbell rows are the old school optimal row. Simple to do, fast to learn, and guarantees results provided that you get strong enough. Which can mean maxing out the dumbbell stack at your local gym, which might only go up to 100 pounds, but that could be enough for many of you provided that good technique is used. Which for today's video, I'm discussing the single arm version without the knee on the bench. Though feel free to use that if you want. All variations are worth doing. The first thing I want to talk about is the lengthened position. New data is constantly confirming that the way to stretch is the most hypertrophic part of a lift. And ideally, we want strength curves where the bottom is most difficult, and as we get closer to the top, the exercise becomes easier, which in a free weighted context, that usually will not be the case. In fact, the majority of the exercises that you and the old school greats have done have been more so short than biased. How crazy is that? Lat pull downs, weighted pull-ups, barbell rows. You notice how you get that sticking point towards that contraction portion? Right about 90 degrees, you struggle to get the final squeeze. This is exactly why so many elite bodybuilders do cheat reps. It is to smooth out this resistance profile, which is faulty by design. That's why we can make the case that momentum is not necessarily bad for free weighted rows. Any row that is gravity operated, which is most of the shit that you do. We can actually say this is a con. The only free weighted exercise that is more so lengthened bias is a T-bar row, or anything that has a lever-based mechanism. That could even be attaching the landmine while you do your weighted pull-ups. So if you want perfection, you need to have an understanding of leverages and come up with creative exercises. For most of you, I wouldn't break your head, but for dumbbell rows, what I do want to point out is that technically, as you get stronger, it becomes a natural length and partial. Stay with me for a sec. Now, let me make a comparison between dumbbell bench and dumbbell row. As you know, when you're pressing past 100 pounds, the size of the dumbbell becomes so massive that the increased range of motion, which everyone raves about as the number one benefit of dumbbells, is reduced. You cannot stretch your pecs as much, and even if you try to bring the arm out further, again, the dumbbells are so big that you can't get it to pass the freaking armpits. This is why Renaissance Periodization uses lighter weights with their dumbbell presses. Dr. Mike will only go up to around 80 pounds or so. So when it comes to pressing, it's the lighter weights, which can serve you for a long time, especially with slow and exaggerated technique, that gives you the length and position benefits. And actually, most presses have a very good resistance profile. But you need to create intentional hacks, right? Well, with dumbbell rows, first of all, your back is significantly stronger than your pecs. We have a situation where it's going to be almost impossible to milk light weights, even with slow and controlled technique, which now the dumbbell size is increased, and it's only gonna get bigger, especially since the stronger guys get screwed over with 10-pound jumps. So that's an extra plate per side if you're using the old school iron dumbbells, but if it's the rubber, it's still bigger, right? So as I just mentioned, with benching, the stretching part is what matters, and the size of dumbbell compromise that, right? But with rows, the stretching portion is not compromised. That has no bearing on you being able to fully stretch out your arm. What it does do, however, is diminish the squeeze to a certain extent. But where does it do so? In the exact position where we have sticking points. The shortened position, the least hypertrophic part of the lift. But now we have a standardized range of motion free weighted exercise. So although it is not the single arm T-bar row, it's not a normal T-bar row, it's not a lever-based machine, it's not perfection, it's still more length and biased than traditional rows. Because you stop at that point right where you have to grind through and use a little bit more cheating, and you still get the complete stretch. You can actually round your upper back. There's no amount of arm lengthening that's going to be problematic. And if somehow your arms really are that long, well, you can always stand on some mats for more range of motion. So this is an easy solution.
Now with sagittal/horizontal pulls, we want less elbow flexion, so not pulling past the body for lat biasing. However, the function of scapular retraction is independent from arm motion because the scapula connects the clavicle to the humerus, so biceps assistance is not needed to hit the upper back. You can still squeeze with locked arms, as seen in Kelso shrugs, but of course this applies to horizontal pulls. And on a similar note, anyone remember nether rows? Turns out they actually were legit. being lengthen biased and focusing purely on the traps and rhomboids. Now for dumbbell rows, the implication here is that we're pulling in the active range for the lats, yet we'll still get yoked since the scapula can fully retract plus protract. So the overall stretch while being horizontal is maximized. Basically, dumbbell rows do it all, including having good carryover to deadlifts of all things. By the way, this same logic does not apply to vertical frontal pulls like wide grip pull-ups, because the final squeeze at lower levels of humeral elevation, so around 90 degrees, is where the lats have the best leverage. So make sure the chin gets high, and for yoke gains, you would need that dead hang, but unfortunately, that does not stretch the lats more. Therefore, it's not a free lengthen partial like in dumbbell rows.
So what I'm saying is, it cuts out the range of motion just enough so you can really focus on the stretch. And now you have a smooth movement pattern. Although if you still want to cheat, that's fine too. We can argue it's even more lengthen bias. And in fact, the way to stretch is now intensified. And Menno Henselman actually pointed this out in one of his recent videos on tempo, suggesting that controlling yet quickly going down provides a better stretch.
When you are lowering the weight relatively fast, in the bottom position, if you are not letting the weight hit your legs, which you shouldn't because then you lose muscle tension, you have to actively decelerate the weight, and that requires high forces. So when you're lowering the weight faster compared to very slowly, you actually have extra emphasis on the bottom position, because then in the bottom position you have to fully decelerate the weight, re-accelerate it to initiate the next concentric action. So not only do you get a potentiating effect from the stretch reflex, you also get the benefit of having very high forces in the bottom position, which might enhance stretch-mediated hypertrophy. So in the end, the seemingly obvious benefit of lowering the weight more slowly and emphasizing the concentric actually doesn't translate into greater tension on the muscle, and it might actually reduce the amount of tension in the most important position, which is typically the bottom position when the muscle is most stretched and lengthened.
And this is something that I've been saying for years when I used to talk about power shrugs and G-rows. Looks like 2016 Alex was right on the mark for so many of these concepts. There was just no science at the time, but now we know it's about the length position. So even though tempo might not really make a big difference, provided that you're going to failure, the effort is there, I wouldn't say there's any negatives, no pun intended, by going down quickly on rows, actually in most back movements in general. And it just makes it that much closer to a T-bar row. Now, another thing is that because we're doing a unilateral row, we actually increase motor unit recruitment. And this can be an absolute game changer for advanced bodybuilders who want that last 5-10% of gains. Especially if you compete and you have lat imbalances, which has affected so many of us. I certainly suffer from this problem. This could be the one exercise that corrects this issue once and for all. And the insane advantage of dumbbell rows is that they're incredibly stable. You would think, oh, it's unilateral, it's less stable. Nope. Complete opposite, no matter how you do it. But the way I'm suggesting is with a tripod stance. That in itself is already a strong position to be rowing from and being bent over, right? And then when you have the other arm brace, you are completely locked in. And speaking about bracing, your lower back will never be a problem, and especially not your core. This is not a bent over barbell row. If anyone says that this is a con for dumbbell rows, then they're really taking things too far. I wouldn't listen to anything they have to say. They are extreme dogmatic motherfuckers who probably never did the exercise with heavy weights, because you can overload to the max and you won't feel your posterior chain being a limiting factor. Like, please don't even bring that up as an argument. That's a fabrication to sell you nonsense. So stability is incredibly high, and the proof is that force production is through the goddamn roof. Whether using cheat form or not, this is the unilateral row that allows you to lift the most amount of weight. What does that say about motor unit recruitment and force production? By definition, it must be peaked out. And it is, because even when we look at chest supported rows at the same angle, or even higher for that matter, because most people do it off a 45 to 60 degree angle, incline bench, your torso is elevated. Basically what you were told not to do on a bent over row, they're doing this on chest support. Not flat like a seal row, which I argue is the best chest supported variation, right? But with an upright torso, and an extra ounce of stability by removing the bracing, somehow, strict or not, same conditions, you lift less. The point is, force production is not higher with that variation compared to the old school dumbbell row. Clearly not a deal breaker. And when we talk about the T-bar variation, actually here we could use some body English, where you're leaning all the way back. One can argue that there's even greater cheating potential, yet we don't see people lifting more weight than the bent over version, even if there is that potential limiter. What does that say? This force production thing is completely blown out of the water. In my sincere opinion, just by looking at what real lifters are doing, they're interchangeable from a muscle activation standpoint.
You believe it's already been a year? For a limited time, you can get any pair of Barbell Apparel jeans, chinos, or pants for $99 each. I wear them every day, in and out of the gym because they're the most comfortable pants I own, and look godly as a non-leg day skipper. Feels tailor-made, designed for hardcore training or just chilling in general. Get yours now, and you won't wear anything else. Trust, that's an honest satisfaction guarantee. I and Barbell Apparel know you'll be impressed. Wear it, hike in it, live in it. Do whatever you want. There's no restrictions. And if you ever have any issues, which I highly doubt, all will be repaired or replaced for you. So check the link in the description box and be sure to tag me if you're rocking my Leonidas Strong tee. This way, I can feature you in my stories.
The old school way is incredibly stable. That's why strength potential and progressibility is impeccable. Whatever you can max out right now, if you continue training your back for years to come, you might even double your dumbbell rowing strength. No lie. If you're doing 100 pounds for reps, it is possible that one day you're doing 200 pounds. Sure, with a little bit of body English, but imagine you already had a big back, now it's gonna get even bigger. Like the back and legs are the two muscles of the natty body that will blow your fucking mind in terms of how heavy you can lift. And the back, I don't think we've seen the full potential yet because we can mix in the old school and the new school. But in this case, dumbbell rows are certainly optimal by fitting the modern criteria. And another important benefit is that you can leverage the rib cage. And this was actually a common practice in the golden era. So what you have is an in and out motion. But the out motion, where you're right about to get that final squeeze, is reduced slightly in range of motion, hence being a bit more lengthened bias, right? But the stretching part is maximized because it's not just neutral now, which if you did traditional chest supported dumbbell rows with both arms, you might have trouble going all the way in, right? Well, here you can actually do it. So you're getting even more stretch. And that's another unique advantage that doesn't require an awkward setup. See, if you're doing a one-arm cable row, it's locked into a neutral position. So you can get a wonderful stretch in your lats, but it's not the best stretch. In order to do that, you need to offset your torso angle such that you're over here, or twist your body inwards this way to get an amazing stretch. And this is what the optimal guys are actually doing on lat pull downs and many rows. They adjust their body angle so that the resistance is coming slightly inwards, right? But with a dumbbell row, you can automatically assume this position because the tripod stance forces an offset torso, and then the dumbbell is coming through you, getting that perfect deep way to stretch with a little bit of upper back rounding if you so choose, and then you're coming out. And again, you have that free lengthened partial because the range of motion is slightly cut out, and you're maximally lengthening the lats in a rhythmic, smooth fashion with tremendous progression potential that actually corrects lat imbalances. If that's not optimal, then I don't know what is. No complicated setup. You can learn this today. And the best part is, the stronger you get, all you gotta do is walk over to the rack, grab the dumbbells which are already set, put your freaking hand down, and row away. Rowing has never been complicated. It's the most dummy-proof thing you can do. And even if you try to fuck it up with excessive cheating, like bad cheating, you're still gonna get a massive bag, good genetics or not. So the stretching aspect is almost as good as $5,000 Prime Fitness rowing machines. Now, if you have that, great, go right ahead. I envy you. But for most of us, dumbbell rows will get the job done, and it's basically all you need. If you're gonna talk about unilateral rows, this is the one row that covers you, and you'll always be able to milk out a little bit more progress. And hey, if you max out dumbbells at your gym, buy some Olympic dumbbells, use some 10-pound plates or even 25s. And again, the 25s being slightly thicker is technically not a con in this context. If you just want to get the way to stretch, and this is what's going to allow you to row 200 plus pounds, which I and many other natties have already done. But these days, I'll just use the heaviest dumbbells at the gym and I'll high rep it. So croc rows, remember those? Now we know why they work so well for hypertrophy. It's just an efficient option. So that's it, just some basic points to consider. As I've shown, dumbbell rows tick most of the optimal boxes. So I hope you give them an honest shot. There's a reason why they're still used today, even by the top pros. They're not going away. They can quite literally take you from beginner to elite, and elite to an even higher level of back refinement. So enjoy the way to stretch, get strong, and I'll see you in the next video.